Before we start today's show, I want to make a few official statements. Number one, I don't want to. I have no plan to. And if I in the near future, you know who did it. Number two, all facts presented in today's episode can be independently verified by visiting the resources document in the description of this episode. And number three, all parties are considered innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Unless they're already proven guilty, then f*** you. Especially with today's episode. Welcome to the Conspiracy Files. Today we're talking about politicians. Let's do a deep dive. So, politicians. This is something that's been coming for a long time here on the show. It's one of the things that absolutely disgusts me and enrages me and pisses me off. People in positions of power who get elected, they harness the power that they have to gain control over the future of America. And behind the scenes, they're raping kids, they're sharing child porn. They're like the demons of society, the worst possible people. And this is a widespread problem. This isn't one or two people in government that just happen to like children or have an attraction to kids. This is a major institutional problem. And I'm not even talking about rings. I'm not talking about Epstein. Today's episode doesn't involve any real organized element that we're going to be exposing. We're just going to be going down a list and exploring the cases of politicians who have been elected, they've put the work in, and while they were, serving America, quote unquote, they were exposed for being pedophiles. Now, this is a very disturbing episode. We're going to be covering a lot of dark details, so listener viewer discretion is heavily advised here. But please, if you value this show, if you like what we're doing here, if you want to join along and help us spread the word that run America and really run the world and, help enlighten people, please like today's video, leave me a comment because that helps boost the algorithm and helps people see my videos, and share the channel. Post it on Reddit, post it wherever you get your research or you do your research. Help me spread the word about what we're doing here, because this is a grassroots show. It's not funded by anybody. This is just me sitting here rambling about things that I care about in a bedroom in my house. Anything you guys can do to help helps. You can even post clips from the show on TikTok. You can do whatever with this footage. Just help me spread the word. Without further ado, let's get into today's story. And I want to thank Rebecca Whitworth for helping bring this stuff to light. She's an incredible writer and researcher who has helped make this show possible, so thank you, Rebecca. According to Poly Engine, there are approximately 519,682 politicians in power currently in the United States, and that doesn't even include retired representatives or people who previously held positions of power in the military or government. These include a multitude of officials, such as senators, ministers, governors, mayors, counselors, representatives, speakers, judges, and many others who are elected to their positions. Many of us assume we know what tasks they do on a daily basis, such as vote on legislation, campaign, and raise money. But what else really goes on behind the scenes of America's greatest puppets, the elite 2%? You see, American politicians and their alleged participation in child crimes should be no surprise, especially in recent years with the development of the Jeffrey Epstein affair and all the people that were associated with that, whether they had a lot to do with it or had nothing to do with it. I'm talking about everybody from Bill Clinton to Kevin Spacey to Trump. Whether or not they were guilty or implicit in these activities, there is still an association between Jeffrey Epstein, the most infamous child trafficker probably of all time at this point, and these people that are in power in politics. And I want to remind everybody, this episode and this series as a whole is not political. If I bring up crimes that a Democratic politician committed, I'm not criticizing all Democrats. And that goes same way for Republicans. I am not a political guy myself. This whole show, the whole point of this is to open your eyes to what's really happening, because they're coming for you. They're not coming for these people that we're talking about. The people that are being victimized, especially in stories like this, are innocent children. And it doesn't matter what the child's parents' political affiliations are to these people. They just see victims, they see dollar signs, they see blackmail opportunities. So I want to remind everybody, this is not a political show, but we're going to expose some politicians today. In FY16 alone, Child Protective Services agencies substantiated or found strong evidence to indicate that 57,329 children were victims of sexual abuse. It was also said that 1 in 9 girls and 1 in 20 boys under the age of 18 experienced sexual abuse or assault. So just how many politicians out there are really preying on young children and committing crimes against them? Today, we're going to be taking a look at just how many politicians are convicted pedophiles and have been running the United States of America across every single state. And we're going to start with Alabama and the case of Roy Moore. Roy Moore was an American politician, lawyer, and jurist who served as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Alabama from 2001 to 2003, and again from 2013 to 2017. Terry Parker of local news station WPBF 25 News reported on the allegations against Roy in 2017. Take a look.
Saying his reason for doing so here, quote, "I worry it will be impossible to give my constituents the full attention they deserve." But he goes on to say, "I adamantly deny all allegations that have been made and will pursue all avenues in an effort to prove my innocence."
Another was notably Lee Corfman, who in 2017 told the Washington Post that Roy Moore had initiated an unwanted sexual encounter with her when she was 14, which would have been a felony under state law. Another victim was Beverly Young Nelson, who claimed she had received unwanted attention from Roy Moore when she was 15 years old. Now, obviously, Roy Moore himself vehemently denied these allegations. Take a look.
I want to address what's been brought out on television today by Gloria Allred and a client that she has about things I allegedly did. I want to make it perfectly clear. The people of Alabama know me. They know my character. They know what I've stood for in the political world for over 40 years. And I can tell you without hesitation, this is absolutely false. I never did what she said I did. I don't even know the woman. I don't know anything about her. I don't even know where the restaurant is or was.
So this is just beginning to scratch the surface. And like I said, as we go down this list, I think you're going to be absolutely flabbergasted because no state is immune from this stuff. Alaska. According to the People's Voice, Democratic State Senator from Alaska, George Jacko, was found guilty of sexual harassment of an underage legislative page in 1993. In 2012, the former Republican mayor of Ketchikan, Alaska, Jack Shea, pled guilty in a plea deal, reducing his 91 charges of child porn down to 7. He served as the mayor of Ketchikan in 1979 and again in 1982. Then in 2016, the Mexican Navy captured Alaskan house magnate Bill Weimar on a warrant for charges of assaulting a 6-year-old girl in Florida. And after his arrest, he was sentenced to 6 months in prison, 6 months home confinement, and fined $75,000 by Anchorage Federal Court. So there you have 3 officials in Alaska convicted of crimes. These are people that are infiltrating every single bracket of American politics and society. And these are people that are in power, that are running our country. And behind closed doors and behind the curtains, they're kids or consuming child porn. Arizona. In 1983, former Arizona Representative David Stringer was arrested on suspicion of paying 2 children under the age of 15 to have sex with him. David allegedly paid the boys $10 after he performed oral sex on them and had them return the favor on him. David later benefited from a plea deal that hid his arrest for child porn. So no one really knew about this child porn charge and how terrible these things that David had done were. But in 2019, an Arizona news station reported that Stringer had suddenly resigned.
Last summer, the Prescott Republican came under fire for racist comments about Latinos and African Americans. Then news reports in January revealed Stringer had been charged with sex-related offenses 30 years ago. Stringer was banned from campuses in the largest school district in the community he serves. Governor Doug Ducey and other top Republicans urged Stringer to resign, but Stringer resisted. The beginning of the end came when the House of Representatives voted in January to start an ethics investigation. Investigators subpoenaed Stringer's criminal records, which had been expunged, and required him to sit for an interview. The deadline to submit the records was 5 p.m. today. Stringer refused, and 1 hour before that deadline, he finally quit.
Bizarre. The government helping hide prior convictions? Who would have guessed? Another According to news station Arizona's Family, in 2024, Senator Otoniel Tony Navarrete was sentenced to 1 year in prison, followed by 10 years for repeatedly assaulting a child. Additionally, he was arrested in 2019 and indicted in 2021 on 7 other child crime charges. Yet, publicly, he denied the allegations.
Saying his reason for doing so here, quote, I worry it will be impossible to give my constituents the full attention they deserve. But he goes on to say, I adamantly deny all allegations that have been made and will pursue all avenues in an effort to prove my innocence.
Of course, those denials were a lie, and he was guilty of a litany of disgusting crimes against children. But there's so many here, we can't spend too much time on just one. We have to keep moving. According to Newsweek, Republican candidate for the Maricopa County Community College District's governing board, a man named Randy Kaufman, was arrested and charged with indecency after he was allegedly found masturbating near a preschool on October 4th, 2022. The police report, when media outlets got a copy of it and they reviewed it, revealed exactly why Randy Kaufman, that guy who was campaigning to be a part of a community college governing board, it revealed why he was masturbating near preschool. He claims he was stressed. Then there's Rules Committee Chair Representative Anthony Kern, who prevented testimony from child sex abuse survivors in order to protect predators. That's right, Anthony Kern tried to stop these children from testifying and tried to stop their stories from being put out when predators were on trial. Don't know the exact details of why he did that, but they should check his hard drive. According to KSL Utah News, Republican Maricopa County Assessor Paul Peterson was indicted for human trafficking and selling children in 2019. He additionally worked as an adoption lawyer, and he ran a scheme where he was recruiting pregnant women, paying them, and basically enticing them into giving up their own babies for adoption. So, just a truly despicable guy, selling children, human trafficking, paying pregnant women to give up their children. For what reason? What drives a sick individual to do such a thing? And I'm sure there are so many more that haven't been ousted, but we got a lot of states to get through. Arkansas. In the Arkansas Democrat Gazette in 2018, previous chairman of the Pulaski County Democratic Party, Harold Moody, distributed child porn and smoked meth while seated at his desk in the county administration building. It was reported in the news at the time that Moody was distributing images of babies and young children being assaulted, and eventually hosting chat room streams where he showed these images and videos. Obviously, he was arrested and kicked out after this, but a previous chairman of the Democratic Party smoking meth and distributing child porn in a government building. I don't know how you can get sicker than that. In an Arkansas Times article from 2007, Republican politician Andrew Beer of Arkansas was charged with 2 counts of first-degree sodomy with a 13-year-old boy. This just goes to show both parties have their own people that are guilty and complacent in this sort of abuse. But now on to a bigger state, California. Former Democratic Deputy Attorney General from California, Raymond Liddy, was arrested for possession of child porn in 2020. And was sentenced to 5 years of probation. He was found with hard drives containing sexually explicit images depicting prepubescent girls. Deputy Attorney General, the top cop in the state, one of them, and he's got child hard drive. Does he go to prison? Does he go to jail? No, he's a powerful politician in the state, so he gets 5 years of probation for perpetuating the insane abuse that these children suffered by downloading and disseminating these images and videos. I mean, couldn't be more horrific. In 2002, Republican legislative aide Howard L. Brooks for Phil Wyman was charged with 5 felony counts, carrying a maximum of 17 years in prison. Counts that included committing a lewd act on a child, continuous sexual abuse of a child, oral copulation with a minor younger than 14, providing lewd material to a minor, and possession of child pornography. Republican Judge Ronald C. Klein of California was placed under house arrest for child molestation and possession of child pornography in 2007. So you've got multiple politicians here possessing child pornography, including a judge who's sentencing people to prison time while at the same time building up a sick library of child abuse material. And according to a Los Angeles Times article, Republican Brian O'Toole was convicted of child molestation in the year 1990. This list just goes on and on and on. I mean, it's really disturbing stuff when you see judges, just to reiterate that point, somebody who's supposed to uphold the law and who sentences people for their dirty deeds, committing the dirtiest of deeds behind the scenes while he's sitting up there smug with that fucking gavel, telling you you need to go to prison for having a gram of cocaine, but I'm going to be allowed to watch children get in my free time and jack off to it. It's fucking disgusting. God. Colorado. Republican Congresswoman Lauren Boebert's husband was arrested in January 2004 after allegedly exposing his penis to two women at a bowling alley, according to an arrest affidavit as recounted in a New York Post article. Lauren Boebert was then a minor at that same time at 17 years old and was known as Lauren Opal Rock. He eventually pled guilty to public indecency and lewd exposure involving minors. Oh yeah, he didn't just flash normal adults, he flashed children. Then you have Democratic State Representative candidate for Colorado, Andrew Myers, who after running and getting in the public eye was convicted for possession of child porn and enticing children. Then you've got Democratic former Mayor Anthony Silva, who served from 2013 to 2017, who was charged with providing alcohol to minors during a game of strip poker that included a 16-year-old boy at a camp for underprivileged children run by the mayor. So the mayor was running a charitable camp for underprivileged kids. This is the mayor, the face of your city. And he goes to this camp, gives children alcohol, and plays strip poker with kids, preying on the underprivileged children. It's disgusting. According to a Denver news station, in 2002, Republican parole board officer and former Colorado State Representative Larry Jack Schwartz was fired after child porn was found in his possession. Parole board officer, a guy working with the cops in the Justice Department with child porn. An Associated Press article reported that anti-tax conservative city council member Brian McKenzie from Craig, Colorado, was sentenced to 10 years of probation for attempted sexual assault of a child in 2019. And in 2021, in Severance, Colorado, Mayor Donald Marceau McLeod, a Republican, resigned after being arrested for child porn. You see, an anonymous citizen reported that they had watched a minor as they were being dragged into a van, which ended up belonging to Donald McLeod. Now, that boy reported that he had met the mayor, Mr. McLeod, on the gay dating app Grindr, and he had told him initially that he was 19. But when he confessed to his status as a minor, Donald told him that isn't an issue. God, this touches every single part of American politics. And now we get to Connecticut. Republican mayor and former state representative Philip Giordano is currently serving a 37-year sentence in federal prison for abusing 8 and 10-year-old girls in March of 2003. At the time, Giordano was convicted of 14 counts of arranging contact with children. When the FBI raided his home and looked into what he was doing behind the scenes, they also found phone records and pictures of Mayor Giordano with the as well as her 10-year-old niece and her 10-year-old daughter. He apparently had hired this and had asked her to bring her niece and her daughter with him so that he could them. And in 2013, WTNH News reported that Giordano felt like he was wrong.
Attorneys for disgraced former Waterbury Mayor Philip Giordano are trying to convince a federal judge to grant him a new trial. In 2003, Giordano was sentenced to 37 years in prison after being convicted of sexually abusing 2 young girls while he was in office. Today, attorneys for Giordano argued in Bridgeport Federal Court that his original trial lawyer made mistakes that cost the former mayor his freedom. Among those miscues, according to Giordano's new counsel, failing to subpoena records from the Department of Children and Families.
If that lawyer does the job that they're supposed to do, defends that person to the best of their ability with all the information that's out there, and there's a conviction, so be it. Then the jury has had an opportunity, the people have had an opportunity to judge this person and convict them. That is a true and correct conviction. In this case, it didn't happen.
Giordano is currently serving his time at a federal prison outside of Connecticut. No word on when the judge will decide on his appeal.
In 2023, though, it was revealed by both victims in independent interviews, that Giordano never one time apologized for his actions. Totally sick. According to an article in the New York Times published in 2004, Republican legislator Peter Dibble pleaded no contest to having an inappropriate relationship with a 13-year-old girl. It was reported that he had been molesting her since she was 10 years old. And even after the allegations, he didn't resign or even take a leave of absence. he said he's going to stick with it. That is, until he was eventually convicted. In 2016, Gary Shafrick, state GOP treasurer in Connecticut, was accused of child endangerment, which sounded a lot like sexual assault. Apparently, Gary, that GOP treasurer, reportedly enjoyed bathing nude with a 5-year-old boy who wasn't his family member, bathed naked with this child. He also liked to sit this naked child on his lap, and he shared a bed with this child at sleepovers. This is a grown adult doing this with a 5-year-old child. According to the Hartford Courant, in 2018, GOP Farmington, Connecticut town council member John Landry carried out an extramarital affair for years with a young woman he had met online when she was just 12 years old. And according to her, he began having sex with her after she turned 16. What to say? I don't really know. Delaware. Republican City Councilman Fred C. Smeltzer Jr. pled no contest to a 15-year-old girl and served 6 months in prison in 2005. In 2015, Eric Bodenweiser, GOP state Senate candidate, according to an article on Delaware Online, was arrested for over 100 counts of child abuse and pleaded no contest to lesser charges. He additionally was accused of touching the genitals of a 15-year-old boy multiple times between the years of 1987 and 1991. WBOC News was actually live during his trial in 1991, and here's a clip.
Bodenweiser himself took the stand.
It's his testimony. It's not mine.
WBOC caught up with one of his attorneys, Eric Mooney, to ask him what to expect.
He will maintain that he never sexually molested anyone, including this accuser.
And that's exactly what he did. He pointed out inconsistencies with the accuser's story, including what is referred to as the tanning bed incident. The accuser said he was molested by a tanning bed in the master bedroom, but on the stand, Bodenweiser said that was impossible due to the room size. It would have never fit in there, he said. When his attorney asked him if he ever tried to put it in there, he said that the bedroom didn't even have the right type of outlet to do so. On the stand, though, he did admit to showing the boy adult movies. He said it all started in 1991. I came back to the house and went in the bedroom, he said. In there was the boy in the bedroom, and he was looking at a Playboy. At first, he says he told the boy to go home, but eventually he said he let the boy watch adult movies 3 or 4 times. I thought I'd show him, he said. A horrible mistake. Bodenweiser then got some harsh questioning from the state, at one point asking, were you attracted to younger men at this time? His response then and throughout the case to this question was no.
So as you can see, it doesn't matter what part of the country you're in. It doesn't matter what political party you are allegedly serving. Have infested every part of American society and politics. And this is a really important video, I feel like, for people to watch, to show. It's not just one party. It's not just one type of person. This is everybody. And now we get to Florida. The Washington Post reported that Florida Republican Congressman Mark Foley abruptly resigned from Congress after explicit emails surfaced showing him flirting with a 16-year-old boy in 2006. But in 2015, the Associated Press archive reported that he was back in the public eye. Mark was on talk radio, speaking to groups of young Republicans.
My suggestion, we sell the municipal bond portfolio.
Those in attendance said they see Foley as the future leader of the community.
He was a good man, and he was good for the state of Florida, and he was good for our district when he was congressman. So I think we have to overlook. We all have iniquities that we have to overcome.
Foley stayed very much out of the media spotlight during his hiatus. It wasn't until about a year ago he decided to reemerge in the political arena.
This radio was the opening of the microphone that Mark Foley's voice is out. But I think being part of that debate's not ever going to be out of my system. It doesn't mean I have to be an active person with a name badge.
While few haven't forgotten his downfall, there are signs that some have forgiven Foley and still respect his political views. Suzette LeBoy, The Associated Press.
So he resigned from Congress after explicit emails between him and a 16-year-old boy were published. And then years later, he couldn't resist being around children. Mark Foley wriggled himself back in with a group of youths and was speaking to them. Now, after this all was made public and news stations reminded the public of what this guy had done in the past, there was an outrage. But of course, I mean, I think stuff like that they should be in prison for much longer than these people get. In 2007, New York Times announced that Republican prosecutor John David Roy Atchison had been arrested on charges of flying across the country to try have sex with a 5-year-old girl. This is the prosecutor of a county. This is the guy choosing what cases they're gonna fighting these cases, supposedly a knight in shining armor, a knight of justice for victims, flying across the country to try have sex with a 5-year-old girl. Now, John David Roy Atchison, after this all came out, committed suicide later that year. There's still a lot of questions there, but I think you can assume that he was guilty based on his final action. In 2008, according to Newsweek, Albert Andre Zimmerman, a GOP-appointed spokesperson for the state of Florida Department of Children and Families, was charged with 8 counts of trying to entice 2 teenage boys to take photos of themselves while they were. He wanted these children to send him photos and videos of them pleasuring themselves so that he could get off to it. But he got caught, thankfully. Kevin Hahn, the former mayor of Brooksville, Florida, an unsuccessful Republican primary candidate for Hernando County Commission, was arrested for possessing child 2021, according to a Florida County news page called the Hernando Sun. The article reported that, quote, investigators executed a search warrant at Hahn's residence. An examination of an external hard drive revealed more than 100 images depicting minors engaging in conduct, and that some of it had been covertly recorded inside of Hahn's home, end quote. So, once again, you have a mayor and a candidate not only possessing child but recording child pornography secretly inside of his home. It can be assumed that this was relatives of his. I don't know the exact details, but I mean, it's just disturbing whichever way you cut it. In an article by the Tallahassee Democrat in 2021, Eric Lippman, who was appointed by the governor and a part of the general counsel for the Florida Elections Commission, was investigated for 19 files that were found in his email account, which all contained child sex abuse material, as well as a number of disturbing internet searches that he made on his work laptop, searching for child abuse material, child pornography, behavior, and images and videos of children between the ages of 3 and 5 years old. Once again, I don't know why these feel the need to actually look up this child material on their work computer or in their places of work. It's absolutely insane that they can't control themselves, that they have to do this on their work computer, or like the guy from Arkansas in the government building smoking meth and spreading child. I mean, it's really disturbing. These people feel like they have so much power that they're above the law, and they're not. I'm just here to remind you that they're not. And if you're and you're watching this or listening to this, we're coming for you. I'm coming for you. And your time's up. But back to Florida. In 2019, the Orlando Sentinel reported that former judicial candidate Andrew Jon Jones pleaded guilty to child abuse and tampering with evidence after he teenage girl while working on his campaign and got no jail time. That's right, former judicial candidate Andrew Jon Jones pleaded guilty to child abuse and tampering with evidence. Let me reiterate that, after he a teenaged girl, and he spent no time in jail. Doesn't that piss you off? It really pisses me off. Ed Gray, a former Gulf Breeze, Florida mayor and losing Republican primary candidate for 2013, pleaded no contest to charges of secretly taping young boys undressing, video voyeurism, and stalking, according to a Pensacola News Journal in 2020. Investigators initially began investigating former Mayor Ed Gray after an 18-year-old told the police that he had found hidden cameras in the master bedroom of Ed Gray's house. And later on, after the police raided his residence and took in all of his electronic devices, at least 8 different videos were found of 4 different underage males, either nude or undressing, in Ed Gray's bathroom in his home. Then you have William Henry Randall, 1998 Republican candidate for Congress in Florida, who was sentenced to 20 years in prison for sexual battery against a 12-year-old, who he multiple times from 2007 to 2015. The warrant for this arrest reported that the victim said the, quote, encounters would happen after church services and also on weekdays when she would go to the church by herself to clean. And Randall told her not to tell anyone about the encounters because it would ruin both of their lives. Well, it certainly ruined his life. And how disturbing. Someone who's putting themselves out probably to the world as a man of God, somebody who's probably in their campaign talking about how they have faith They have faith in God. They love Jesus Christ, the teachings of Jesus. And then they're a child after church while the child is at church. There are just no words. There are no words for that. But we got to move on to Georgia. The People's Voice reported that in 2020, Democratic former mayor of Dawson, Georgia, a man named Christopher Wright, was indicted on charges of aggravated sodomy, rape, child and statute of an 11-year-old boy and a 12-year-old girl. There's the former mayor, a Democrat of Dawson, Georgia, who raped an 11-year-old boy and a 12-year-old girl. Then you've got 71-year-old Republican Joseph Dendy, who was the Cobb County, Georgia Republican Party chairman, and a Sunday school teacher who was sentenced to life in prison after 2016 after being convicted on 4 counts of child, 4 counts of first-degree cruelty to children, 3 counts of enticing a child for indecent purposes, and 1 count each of aggravated battery and aggravated child. Now, Joseph Dendy's victims were aged 4 and 12 years old. Absolutely disturbing. A Sunday school teacher and Republican Party chairman who was cruelly, there's those charges of cruelty against children, a 4-year-old and a 12-year-old. According to the Grogan versus State case, Republican Sheriff Perry Grogan continued to campaign despite being indicted for child. So the Republican sheriff, this guy Perry Grogan, was indicted for child, but he continued to run for sheriff for the election. He wouldn't back down, but he was eventually convicted in 1998, thank God. But I mean, I think it's so disturbing. You see time and time again throughout these cases, these politicians thinking they're not only above the law, but they think that they don't have to give a shit about, you know, what they've done. Like, this guy is literally being accused and indicted for children, and he's still just going out there campaigning. It's crazy. Then there's Kerry Rhodes, the Republican mayor of Taylorsville, Georgia, who was convicted of trying to have sex with a child in an internet sting in 2012, according to the Dalton Daily Citizen. He only got 2 years in prison and 10 years of probation on 1 count of computer and electronic child exploitation. Kerry Rhodes was also required to pay a $2,000 fine plus court costs and surcharges, perform 240 hours of community service, and abide by sex offender restrictions, avoiding all children except his grandchildren, nieces, and nephews with another adult present. Absolutely incredibly disturbing that you can try to go a child and you get 2 years in prison. In 2008, Anthony Emanuel, the former mayor of Trenton, Georgia, and another failed Republican candidate for county executive, was charged with child of a 4-year-old girl. This unsealed warrant said that Anthony Emanuel took the girl and a dog to the barn, pulled down his pants and underwear, and instructed this 4-year-old girl to touch him and not stop touching him until he said so. Additionally, disturbingly enough, this warrant contained bestiality charges as well, as Anthony allowed the dog to lick his genitals while he was in the presence of a child. Oh, that's got to be one of the most f***ed up yet. The former mayor, the face of your city. But let's move on to Hawaii. Even the beautiful Hawaiian Islands and their sunsets and rainbows aren't immune to. In Hawaii, Republican County Councilman Keola Childs pled guilty to a 14-year-old boy in 2000, according to an online Honolulu newspaper, and he also subjected this boy to penetration. But he was sentenced to, take a guess real quick, think about this in your minds. How long do you think he got for a child? 1 year in jail. Idaho. In 2018, CBS News reported that Idaho State Representative, Republican Brandon Hickson, resigned while under criminal investigation for molesting 2 girls, including a young female relative, for a period of over 10 years. Now, Brandon apparently had been molesting this young female relative for over 10 years, like I just said, and when this news came out, he killed himself 3 months later, shortly before his ex-wife and 2 others were to testify before a grand jury about his charges. After Brandon, his ex-wife Danielle Hickson revealed all of his secrets. Here's a quote from her.
Shocking allegations from the ex-wife of former Idaho lawmaker Brandon Hickson.
From what you know, how many children were abused by Brandon Hickson?
3. And there could be more.
Danielle was married to Hickson for 10 years. She says she didn't know about the abuse until after her divorce in 2016.
unfortunately, molested them right under my nose.
The 36-year-old lawmaker resigned from the legislature in October after news emerged he was being investigated for possible sex abuse. Hickson was found dead due to a self-inflicted gunshot wound in his home Tuesday morning, one day before he knew Danielle was subpoenaed to testify in front of a grand jury. The details of the alleged abuse are so graphic, we cannot air them on television.
Then you've got Republican Party leader Bobby Stumbo, who was arrested for having with a 5-year-old boy, according to Daily Kos. A 5-year-old boy, a Republican Party leader. You're supposed to lead your party in a positive direction. You're supposed to lead them into an area of positive growth and change. And instead of focusing on that, you're focused on raping a 5-year-old boy. Fucking disgusting. In 2019, former Republican candidate for Idaho Governor Steve Pankey was investigated for kidnapping and of a 12-year-old girl named Janelle Matthews in 1984. 48 Hours actually covered Janelle, and at the time, the former candidate for governor Steve Pankey was suspected to be her killer because of prior allegations. In 2020, Marty Peterson, the former Idaho State Budget Director, received a suspended sentence and 10 years probation for possessing child. Now get this. Marty wasn't okay with just having 10 images of CSAM or CP. He wasn't even content with having 1,000. When investigators cracked Marty's devices, they took a look at his files. They found over 6,000 images of children between the ages of 10 to 12 years old, according to a KTVB article. So he went to jail, thank God, Marty Peterson. But I mean, these people that are in government, it's just disgusting. What are these people thinking? Then you've got Alex Barron, a failed GOP candidate for Idaho House and the secretary of the Kootenai County Republicans. Alex Barron was charged with and abuse of a 12-year-old household member in 2021. At the time, KRM2 News reported that Alex Barron had come home drunk, fondled that 12-year-old child that lived in his house with him, and cupped her buttocks multiple times. Then you've got Edward Ted Burgess, a city councilman in Carlisle who was charged with assault, a felony, and gross imposition of an 8-year-old girl in 2006. And now on to Illinois. In a Reddit thread, it was reported that Democratic Illinois Congressman Mel Reynolds resigned from Congress after he was convicted of statutory of a 16-year-old campaign volunteer. According to People's Voice, Democratic Illinois Congressman Gus Savage was investigated by Democrat-controlled House Committee on Ethics for attempting to an underage female Peace Corps volunteer on a trip in Zaire. The committee concluded that while the events did occur, he did in fact this underage girl. His apology was sufficient and took no further action. Gus Savage, a Democratic congressman, was found, I don't want to say guilty because he was never really charged, but he was found, he had an underage girl. And they just said, okay, sorry's good enough. You can continue being a congressman. Then there's one of the sickest fucks out there, the Republican Dennis Hastert, who was the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives and one of the highest ranking U.S. politicians to ever go to prison. Just check this out.
More sex abuse allegations have surfaced against former Speaker of the House Dennis Hastert ahead of his sentencing for financial crimes later this month. Here's Jerika Duncan.
Hastert's sexual abuses are described in this 26-page document from the U.S. District Court. In it, disturbing details of at least 4 of Hastert's male students when he was a teacher and wrestling coach at Yorkville High School decades ago. The victims say Hastert performed inappropriate massages and sex acts on them. In one instance, a student claims Hastert told him to get on a table so he could loosen him up. Jolene Burge's older brother, Stephen Reinbold, was mentioned in the document. Before he died in 1995, he told his sister he was molested by Hastert while he was a student at Yorkville.
He's Dennis Hastert. He was a teacher. He was a coach. He was beloved by the community. So no one was ever going to believe that this man was capable of it.
According to the document, one unnamed student, quote, recalled that defendant put a lazy boy type chair in direct view of the shower stalls in the locker room where he sat while the boys showered. Comedian Andy Richter from Late Night with Conan O'Brien tweeted, I went to Yorkville High School 80 to 84, and I remember this chair, purportedly to keep boys from fighting. Hastert was Speaker of the House between 1999 and 2007. In May of last year, he was indicted for lying to the FBI about $3.5 million he agreed to pay a former student to keep quiet.
Did you have a sexual relationship with this?
At first, Hastert denied any wrongdoing and claimed he was being extorted. He later agreed to a plea deal for evading bank rules and lying to the FBI about the hush money. The federal and state statutes of limitations on the allegations of sex abuse has run out.
So Dennis was a grade A creep and it was found out later on that he had his students. He had a thing for young boys. Once again, if you're not from America and you're watching this, the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, that is an incredibly high-ranking and powerful position in the United States government. And he was a hardcore that had molested multiple young boys and had multiple victims. Dennis was eventually sentenced to a measly 15 months in prison, a little over a year in prison, with 2 years of supervised release and a $250,000 fine. This goes to show that when it comes to the elite and the rich and the powerful, you can pay your way out of prison. I mean, if an average Joe guy was arrested and charged with the same crimes as Dennis Hastert, they would definitely be going to prison for a longer time, not a little over a year for raping multiple minors. Then you've got Illinois State Representative Keith Farnham, who has resigned and was charged with possession of child and was accused of bragging on an online website about how he had a 6-year-old girl. This just happened a few years ago. Let's keep his name in the press. Keith Farnham bragging online to other that he had a 6-year-old girl. Then you've got a member of the U.S. House of Representatives from Illinois, Daniel Crane, a Republican, who was censured by the House for having sex with a 17-year-old Paige in 1983. After that, he was defeated. He'd never returned to politics, and he went back to practicing as a dentist. Once again, no major repercussions for Daniel Crane, even when he had with a 17-year-old. According to QC Online, in 2001, Republican election board official Kevin Cohen was sentenced to 2 years of probation for soliciting over the internet from a 14-year-old girl. Then you've got Republican County Board candidate Brent Shep, who was charged with a 14-year-old girl in 2021. That's 2 Republican board officials in Illinois, literally 20 years apart, both 14-year-old girls, one soliciting online from a 14-year-old girl and one physically a 14-year-old girl. But there was a twist with Brent Shep, the one who the girl in 2021. He died in a car crash afterwards that was investigated as a Also in 2021, which was a bad year for Illinois, Republican Mayor Tom Adams was arrested for distributing child over the internet. Tom was sentenced to 30 days in the county work release program. He was told to pay $10,000, undergo psychological treatment, and do 200 hours of community service. So you can distribute and download child on the internet, I guess, and all you have to do is spend 30 days in jail and pay 10 grand. Seems like a good deal for a... It's insane how small of a sentence that is for how big and disturbing of a crime that is. Then you've got GOP Commissioner John Butler and his wife. The two of them abused John's underage niece in 2007, according to a case law in People versus Butler. John Butler, for some reason, was pardoned by Governor Jack Ryan. Don't know why that happened. In 2022, a Patch News article reported that Illinois candidate for a state house seat, Tim McCullough, dropped out of the race after accusations of grooming arose from a botched investigation the year before. While trying to extract data from an underage child's phone, the data was corrupted. The child's family then decided to not pursue charges. So this guy had groomed this girl, this underage child. They had the evidence, and then the phone corrupted, the evidence was lost, and he was never charged with anything officially. Then you've got Sonneman, Illinois' former mayor Mike Stokeland, who pled guilty to possession of child, and even more disturbingly, this was child he created himself. Yes, this former mayor of the town filmed himself with one of his grade school students in 2021, and in this video, he requested that the student pose in a manner and engage in a act. Disturbing. Now we got to move on to Indiana. Holy shit, there was a lot of in Illinois. According to the People's Voice in 2017, Democratic official from Terre Haute, Indiana, David Roberts, was sentenced to federal prison for producing and possessing child that he created by placing hidden cameras in the bedrooms and bathrooms at a home he shared with 2 minor female victims in 2007. Disturbing. Then you've got Republican Madison County Councilman Stephen Summer, who was arrested for child seduction and possession of child pornography regarding a 16-year-old girl in 2020. And now we've got Iowa. A woman from Iowa, a woman named Sarah Watson, accused a Davenport alderman of when she was a teenager. She spoke to police in 1999 and again in 2023, but nothing was done about it. Nothing. Sarah Watson tried to raise the alarm and nobody has listened to her, even in the current year all the way up to today. So you've got a rapist alderman in Davenport, Iowa, and nothing's being done. According to the Iowa Capitol Dispatch, 74-year-old Daniel Weichman Jr. of Hampton, Iowa, was accused and pled guilty in Polk County District Court to a misdemeanor charge of assault with intent to commit child and misdemeanor indecent contact with a child. A charge of indecent exposure was dismissed, and Weichman was an elected county attorney and served for Franklin County from 2009 to 2014. In 2018, Gary Lee Hansen, former city councilman of Sac City, Iowa, was arrested and convicted of child including contact with 2 young girls. Then you've got Jeremy Filbert, Republican former mayor of Mitchellville, Iowa, who was charged with 2 counts of and sodomy of a 14-year-old girl in Kansas in 2015. Speaking of Kansas, let's move to Kansas. In Kansas, you've got Wichita Rep. Michael Capps, who is accused of emotionally abusing boys in 2018. No other additional information was included in that press release, but Michael Capps refused to resign and wasn't removed from future ballots. Weird, right? And on to Kentucky. You've got in Kentucky, Republican Tim Nolan, who was the chairman of Donald Trump's presidential campaign in Kentucky and a former Campbell County judge. Tim Nolan served as a judge, a school board member, and a city solicitor. He was close to children. He used his political power and influence to work his way into positions where he would be near children, and he was eventually found guilty of forcing 19 victims to perform, and 7 of those victims who were forced to perform those acts were minors under the age of 16. Tim Nolan pled guilty on February 11th, 2018 and was sentenced to serve 20 years in prison. In 2012, Republican Kentucky State Representative and pastor Dan Johnson was accused of against a family friend's daughter, Miranda Richmond, who was 17 at the time. Miranda's family went to the police in April of 2013, but the case was closed with no charges filed. Interesting. Dan Johnson, that Republican state representative and pastor, committed in 2017 after an expose revealed his serial lies, suspected arson, the crimes committed by his church, his racism, his accused of Miranda, and so much more. The guy was an absolute piece of shit. In 2019, according to an article by author Antonia Nori Farzan, Governor Matt Bevin pardoned a child because he claimed that since her hymen was intact, she wasn't. Scientists have since debunked the notion that inspecting an alleged victim's hymen can prove whether or not they were assaulted. And they even found that most survivors of child abuse don't have any lasting physical damage. Additionally, before leaving office, the same governor issued 428 pardons to a group that included multiple convicted murderers and sex offenders, the Courier-Journal reported. I don't know why that governor loved so much that he wanted to release them back onto the streets, but that's fucking disgusting. Then you've got Paul Reeves, the former mayor of Ashland, Kentucky, who pleaded guilty to receiving and possessing 2 child in 2002, according to the Edwardsville Intelligencer. He resigned just a few days later. And now we get to Louisiana. In 2014, a former Sorrento mayor, Wilson Longenecker, was arrested on 40 counts of child depicting children between the ages of 3 and 14 engaging in behavior or being posed in a sexual manner. A former mayor, again, possessing child. Then in 2020, GOP congressional candidate Ben Gibson was arrested for 4 counts of possession of child. Once again, that depicted children under the age of 13 years old. Now, it should be noted, this same guy, Ben Gibson, who was arrested for possessing child, was a hardcore QAnon conspiracy theorist type guy, where he was always talking about this. So, seems like a bit of projection. And now we get to Maine. Republican Senate candidate John Hathaway was accused of having with his 12-year-old babysitter and withdrew his candidacy for Senate after the allegations were reported in the media. Couldn't find if he was ever convicted of anything, but I doubt that he was. According to the People's Voice, Democratic Maine Assistant Attorney General James Cameron was sentenced to just over 15 years in federal prison for 13 counts of child possession, receipt, and transmission in 2009. Now, I still think the sentences should be a bit longer, but I'm okay with 15 years in prison. I can at least be okay with that. I think child should be a life sentence, but that's just me. Then you've got Lincoln County GOP Commissioner and Town Clerk Merrill Robert Barter of Booth Bay Harbor, who was arrested for molesting an underage boy while at the state Republican convention. This guy was literally at the state Republican convention, the place where they're going to talk about government and governing and the rules and the laws, and he a young boy. You've also got John Hyatt, the Republican Penobscot County Treasurer and Bangor School Committee member, who was arrested for one count of possession of a child under 12 and stalking, harassing, and felony invasion of privacy of a woman in 2021. And now we get to Maryland. In 2021, as reported in an article by the Baltimore Sun, Caroline County, Maryland Circuit Judge Jonathan Newell, a Republican, himself when agents showed up at his house to arrest him on child charges and possession of illicit images of children. Here's the story from WJZ.
There's some new information tonight about a Caroline County Circuit Court judge who killed himself as FBI agents attempted to apprehend him on child pornography charges. Federal and state officials announced today that Jonathan Newell acted alone and did not distribute any images. In July, police responded to a cabin on Hooper's Island where Newell had taken local children on retreats. A child had found a video camera in the bathroom and called his parents. Newell denied having the camera, and while talking with investigators, he swallowed a memory card. Investigators later found multiple digital devices and a hard drive that showed videos of boys showering inside Newell's home.
You've also got Republican Congressman and notably anti-gay activist Robert Bowman, who was charged with having sex with a 16-year-old boy he picked up at a gay bar in 1980. You can't make this up. That is projection at its finest. An anti-gay activist charged with having with a minor, a boy, at a gay bar, or that he picked up from a gay bar. I mean, that's fucking disturbing. Then you've got Matthew Palmer. The Baltimore Sun reported that Matthew Palmer, a former CEO of the Maryland Department of Commerce and a former aide to Republican Governor Hogan, pleaded guilty of sharing and having pictures and videos of children while they were being abused. According to the reports, there were over 1,000 images and videos of child on Matthew Palmer's devices. And we're moving on now to Massachusetts. In 1983, Democratic Massachusetts Congressman Jerry Studs was censured by the House of Representatives after he admitted to having an inappropriate relationship with a 17-year-old male page and had advanced on 2 other young men. He didn't go to prison though. Didn't go to jail for a day. Michigan. Author Lindsay Smith reported in 2014 to Michigan NPR that GOP Kent County Commissioner Gary Rolls got 1 year in prison for a young woman from the age of 9 to 23. This is the GOP County Commissioner, a child from when that girl was only 9 years old all the way up until the age of 23, completely traumatizing this girl, completely destroying her life. The victim reported that, quote, "He made me do things that made me physically sick and he didn't care. If I cried, he told me to stop because I was weak. If I said no, he told me I wasn't allowed to tell him no because he was the adult and I was the child. There were no words to truly reflect the pain, the fears, and the lifelong scars that I have endured because of him," end quote. He resigned, as reported by Wood TV 8. Unfucking believable that he got a year in prison for that. Politicians, though, power, and they want to protect their own. Here's the report about his resignation.
Looks like he's done. Embattled Kent County Commissioner Gary Rolls has resigned as he faces 6 felony charges stemming from allegations he sexually abused a girl for years, starting when she was just 9. 24 Hour News 8's Danny Carlson is getting reaction from county leaders.
You know what, Brian, and of the many county leaders that I spoke to today, no one really seems surprised by Gary Rolls' decision to step down, saying they didn't think it was a matter of if he would, but rather when.
Then you've got the former Republican Speaker of the Michigan House, Lee Chatfield, who was accused of assaulting a 15-year-old girl for 15 years. This exploitation only stopped in the year 2021. The Speaker of the Michigan House, Lee Chatfield. The victim of Lee's was his sister-in-law, and she attended his church when he started it up. And apparently she had attended Lee's church when it started, and yeah, things just progressed, and he became a for 15 years. Don't know what happened to him, but I'm sure he's not getting life in prison like he should be. But we gotta move on. According to a Times Herald article in 1999, Gerald Ajax Ackerman, the Port Huron, Michigan mayor, was convicted of contact with minors. Now, Gerald Ajax Ackerman had raped 3 girls who were 8, 11, and 12 years old, and he was charged with 25 counts sexual misconduct in the following year. Thankfully, he got some prison time, but it's never long enough. Minnesota. In September 2018, Republican Minnesota State Representative Jim Knobloch ended his re-election campaign when his daughter came forward and alleged that her father had been touching her inappropriately for more than 10 years, beginning when she was only 9 years old. Laura, his daughter, reported that her father entered her room after she had gone to bed, got in, and laid down behind her. She told the station that Knobloch routinely kissed her arms and neck and bit on her ears. On dozens of occasions, she said, he approached her from behind while they were together in the kitchen and pressed his penis against her backside, pinning her against the refrigerator or dishwasher. He would put his arm around me and not let me get up or get away, and he would lick my neck or bite my ear, she said. About her own father. Then you've got Republican businessman John Grunseth, who withdrew his candidacy for Minnesota governor after allegations surfaced that he went swimming in the nude with 4 underage girls, including his own daughter, in 1980. Then you've got Minnesota GOP rep Jim Rosselberg, who was charged with 3 counts of criminal conduct for fondling a 14-year-old in 2000. The charges, though, were dropped in exchange for Rosselberg admitting to the elements of the crime, including fondling the 14-year-old girl. But this was handled in juvenile court. How fucking mind-blowing is that? You're assaulting a 14-year-old girl and the charges were dropped just for you to admit what you've done? And that makes no sense to me. But we gotta move on to Mississippi. In an article by Margaret Baker, Senator Philip Moran of Mississippi was arrested in 2002 for battery against a female under 12 years old. Then you've got Alan Moran, the Republican acting mayor of Diamond Head, Mississippi, who was arrested on misdemeanor charges of touching a 17-year-old boy's genitals and buying him beer while they were at his father's, Philip Moran's, yes, the same Philip from the last story, pest company control truck in 2022. So you've got Senator Philip Moran, who's arrested in 2002 for battery against a 12-year-old girl. Then his son, Alan Moran, who was arrested for touching a 17-year-old boy's genitals in his father, the pedophile's truck. Seems like a bit of a family tradition in the Moran family. Then you've got Ronnie Hale, a Republican alderman in South Haven, Mississippi, who pled guilty to transporting child 2018 and sentenced to 7 years in prison. Missouri. In 2007, the Republican mayor of Collins, Missouri, and pastor of the Temple Lot Church in Collins, Alan D. Kaufman, was caught in an internet sting by an adult pretending to be 13 years old, and was then arrested for misconduct with a 14-year-old female. Then you've got Bishop Raymond Burke of Missouri, who said that ex-Senator John Kerry should not get communion and excommunicated all sorts of people, but not priests, in an article by St. Louis NPR in 2008. Missouri Republican Party Director Gene Evans said that in 2021, he needs special attention for diminishing child, claiming that people do strange things when they're grieving. A thread on X posted by Eric Garland, an economic and national security expert, reported that Attorney General Republican Eric Schmidt received several leads that revealed sex trafficking and enslavement at the Agape School with the aid of the Missouri police and ignored them in 2021. Additionally, Missouri Governor Mike Parsons, who is still in office as of 2024, the recording this video, has done nothing to shut down the infamous Agape Christian School where children are tortured and abused, according to a St. Louis Post-Dispatch article from 2002. The rape and torture of children at this school has been an open secret in the state for at least 20 years, and yet no one will do anything about it. There's also Brad Nash, the former mayor of Salem, Missouri, Dent County fire chief, and emergency manager, who was charged with 2 counts of first-degree statutory sodomy and 1 count of second-degree child molestation against 2 female minors in 2023. Montana. In 2019, a former Montana sheriff's deputy, Virgil Wolf, was arrested on suspicion of abusing children, according to an article in the Associated Press. He was eventually charged with 80 counts of abusing minors. A 2019 article by journalist Matt Hoffman reported that State Rep Fred Anderson, a Great Falls Republican, violated mandatory reporting agreements as a high school principal and allowed a predator to continue working as a coach at the school after students came forward about his misconduct in 2019. Nebraska. The People's Voice in 2019 said that Democratic former mayor of Randolph, Nebraska, Dwayne L. Schutt, was arrested and charged with 4 counts of felony third-degree assault of a child and 1 count of intentional child abuse. He pled not guilty and the whole thing disappeared. Then obviously in Nebraska you have the Franklin cover-up, which is something that I am deeply involved with, deeper than you can possibly imagine, and it's an upcoming project that I'm not going to make any official announcements now, but it's the biggest thing I've ever worked on in my life. So research that story on your own. Read the book by Nick Bryant. And we got to move on to Nevada. In Nevada, you've got Richard Gardner, a Nevada state representative, Republican, who admitted to his 2 daughters. And 34% of voters still voted for him, even after he admitted that he his biological blood children. 34% of voters still voted for him. That's 7 over the Keyes constant, or crazification factor, which refers to the portion of the electorate comprising of the nuttiest of wingnuts and most diehard partisans. Absolutely crazy. Then in Nevada, you've got Lieutenant Colonel Kevin J. DeFalco, who was arrested in 2022 for the alleged abuse of a minor. He was charged 7 times, including with lewdness in the presence of a child and 1 charge of abuse or neglect. But the United States Air Force did not follow through on the case. And New Hampshire. Stacey Marie Lawton, a former New Hampshire state lawmaker and the first transgender lawmaker, was charged with aiding and abetting the exploitation of children with their partner, Lindsay Grovers, in 2023, who was exploiting children and distributing child of 3 to 5-year-olds who attended her daycare. WMUR-TV reported on Stacey's court appearance in 2023. Take a look.
Jamie, prosecutors say Lawton, in text messages, asked her then-girlfriend for those explicit photos of children under the age of 5, and they say she received at least 4 of them. Well, today we saw Stacey Lawton there in court, appearing before the judge wearing an orange jumpsuit, hands in front of her, standing next to her lawyer, entering that not guilty plea to the court on federal charges of sexual exploitation of children and aiding and abetting. Prosecutors say Lawton asked her then-girlfriend Lindsay Groves of Hudson to take those explicit photos of kids from the daycare in Tyngsboro, Massachusetts, where Groves worked. And they say Lawton not only wanted pictures, but requested access to the children to sexually assault them. Both Lawton and Groves are being held without bail tonight. Now, Lawton was elected 3 times to the New Hampshire State House. She resigned twice due to separate legal issues. She's also faced previous law enforcement encounters for allegedly calling in a bomb threat and an arrest for stalking. Jen?
Then you've got NBC Boston reporting that Elliot Alu Axelman, a former Republican for the New Hampshire State House, was accused of assaulting a 14-year-old girl at a libertarian festival in 2022. According to the Lancaster Police Incident Report, the victim said she was hanging out with friends at Porkfest on June 25, 2022. The report details that when it got dark, this victim said she was separated from her friends and tried to find her parents. The victim then said her phone was dead, so she wasn't able to call them, according to the report. And during her search, she ran into Axelman, who she described as a family friend. Now, according to the same police report, Axelman, the state House Republican, texted the victim's mother and said he found her. The victim then said in the police report that Axelman offered her a drink of his hard cider, an alcoholic beverage, and she took a sip. She then said that Axelman led her into a vacant field, told her to sit between his legs, and then he kissed her on the neck. According to the report, when she tried to get up, she said he wouldn't let her. The report says that Axelman grabbed her waist and pulled her back into his lap, pushing her butt into his groin while he was erect. A criminal complaint from August 2023 states that Axelman purposely engaged in contact with a minor by touching her buttocks with his body, where such contact can be reasonably construed as being for the purpose of sexual arousal or gratification. His trial just began in June. Then we got New Jersey. In 2005, Republican Committee Chairman Jeffrey Patty was arrested for distributing a video clip of a 5-year-old girl being raped, according to a story in the New Jersey Herald. Then you've got Republican Judge Marcia Silva, who protected a by saying a 12-year-old victim didn't suffer serious harm by being saying that the offense is not an especially heinous or cruel offense, downplaying the severity of a grown man a 12-year-old. Then in 2021, News 12 New Jersey reported that former Sheriff Edward Bullock, a Republican from Warren County, New Jersey, was alleged to have abused young boys in his custody. The victim, WM, reported that Bullock pinned him up at the police station in 1988 and took him to a dirt road where he raped the 11-year-old victim. Another victim named Jack Jeffress, who was a 15-year-old runaway, says that Bullock picked him up and took him for pizza and beer. But afterwards, Bullock drugged the victim and raped him. 4 of Bullock's victims sued the county, alleging that people knew that this was happening, that he was molesting children, and they protected the sheriff. This is the sheriff of a county. The cop, the top cop. Multiple children. In 1992, Bullock pled guilty to official misconduct and confessed to acts with as many as 8 minors, but wasn't tried for rape until 2015, 20 years later, which ended in a mistrial, of course, so he basically got off. Then in 2021, Charles Jandrus, the former Mahwah, New Jersey City Councilman and daycare center operator, was sentenced to probation for possessing child. The plea deal also did not require him to register as a sex offender. The daycare center afterwards got new owners. Then you've got William Gleason, a Republican who held several positions in the Toms River Borough, including heading the Recreation Committee, who was arrested and held without bail for sexually assaulting a child in 2023. New Mexico. A former longtime mayor of northern New Mexico City, Richard Lucero, was accused of sexually abusing the son of a former employee in the 1980s when the child worked for him at his farm supply store. Lucero served 22 years as the mayor of Espanola between 1968 and 2006. New York. CNN in 2017 said that former Representative Anthony Weiner was sentenced to 21 months in prison for sexting a minor. The 15-year-old girl initially contacted Weiner through a direct message on Twitter in January of 2016. Weiner and the girl continued to communicate on social media sites, including on Facebook, Skype, Kik, Confide, and Snapchat. Weiner eventually asked the teen to engage in sexually explicit conduct via Skype and Snapchat, where her body was on display and where she was asked to sexually perform for him, prosecutors said in a sentencing memorandum. I remember when that happened. What a sick fuck. Then, the People's Voice stated that Democratic former mayor of Stillwater, New York, Rick Nelson, pled guilty to 5 counts of possession of child pornography of children less than 16 years of age in 2017, as well as unlawful imprisonment. Then you've got the Democratic former mayor of Clayton, New York, Dale Kenyon, who was indicted for 22 counts of third-degree criminal sexual acts for the alleged abuse of a 14-year-old from 2009 to 2012. In 2016, Democratic former mayor of Millbrook, New York, Donald Briggs, was arrested and charged with inappropriate sexual contact with a person younger than 17. New York Congressman Fred Richmond, who served in the House from 1975 to 82, was arrested for soliciting sex from a 16-year-old boy in 1978. But despite these charges, Fred Richmond was able to easily win re-election and served until corruption, tax evasion, and drug abuse ended his career. Absolutely insane. Solicits sex from a 16-year-old boy and goes on to continue serving as a congressman. Absolutely insane. Then you've got Republican mayoral candidate and pastor Stephen David Rambler, who was accused of having sex with an underage boy and was convicted of soliciting explicit photos from a swingers group and using the pictures to extort money in 2005. Also in 2005, Republican Mayor John Gosek was arrested on charges of soliciting sex from 2 15-year-old girls. Then you've got Republican Mayor Bill W. Nelson of Stillwater, New York, who in 2018 pled guilty to felony counts of child pornography possession. He additionally faced 3 separate sex crime charges from the years 1975 to 1986, including allegations of rape and sodomy against multiple victims. There was also another instance in 1982 in which he allegedly acted inappropriately towards a 5-year-old on the school bus. Can't make this shit up. Then you've got Michael Kelsey, a New York State GOP representative who was convicted of sexually abusing 2 boys, both felonies, along with forcible touching, and 2 counts of endangering the welfare of a child, all misdemeanors in 2016. Both of those incidents occurred while one attempted to touch the other while they were sleeping during a Boy Scout camping trip. In 2019, New York Judge James P. McCluskey ruled firmly in favor of rape, even rape of children, by giving a man who pleaded guilty to raping a 14-year-old girl no jail time, only probation. This same judge who endorsed rape was also endorsed by the Republican, Independents, and Conservative parties. Republican Plattsburgh, New York Assemblyman George Christian Ortloff was sentenced to 12.5 years in prison for soliciting a minor for sex in 2019. Former Blasdell, New York Mayor Michael McGuire, a Republican, was accused by 3 former students of sexual abuse while they were minors in 2019. North Carolina. Republican City Councilman Mark Harris, described as a good military man and churchgoer, was convicted of repeatedly having sex with an 11-year-old girl and sentenced to 12 years in prison. Then you've got Republican Mayor Jeffrey Kyle Randall, who was sentenced to 9 months in jail and 6 years on probation on charges that he molested 2 boys on multiple occasions, engaging in masturbation, oral, and anal sex in 2005. According to news station 6 WECT, Republican State Senate candidate Sherman Lee Kreiner molested a 6-year-old girl in 2006. Prosecutors used an unusual standard of enough evidence to convict rather than probable cause. He wasn't cleared, but he wasn't indicted either. Then you've got South Carolina State Senate candidate and bulletproof vest charity operator Michael Allen Letts. In 2020, he was charged with rape and incest of a minor between the ages of 11 and 14 and a minor under 16. You've also got Peter Van Valley, who was appointed to replace another Republican commissioner in Havelock, North Carolina. He pleaded guilty to 12 counts of sexual exploitation of a minor for possession of child pornography. North Dakota. Senator Ray Holmberg was accused in 2020 of sexual assault in a Twitter thread. This was brought back to light by the suspicious 72 messages that he exchanged with a convicted child pornographer that inexplicably vanished from his phone. Apparently, Ray was texting this child pornographer while he was in prison. Then he tried to claim, "Oh, I was just texting him about some lawn care. I don't know what to do." And it should be added in here, Ray was recently, alleged to have participated in child sex vacationing, where he was going to other countries multiple times on state-sponsored trips and having sex with minors overseas, then coming back and enjoying his position of power in the U.S. Just watch this news report.
We're approaching 4:30 and we are following breaking news for you at 4. Newly filed court documents show former North Dakota Senator Ray Holmberg will plead guilty to a federal charge of traveling abroad to sexually abuse a child. Holmberg was indicted in October with traveling to the Czech Republic several times to have sex with a child, including a 2011 trip to Prague through a program that received state funds. Now, he was set to go to trial in September. The charge carries a maximum punishment of 30 years in prison and a $250,000 fine. The investigation started when it was discovered Holmberg had traded more than 70 text messages with a man jailed on child pornography charges, leading to a search of his home. Now, Nicholas Morgan DeRozier was sentenced to 40 years in federal prison last month, but is appealing.
In 2021, Sergeant Abraham Carrillo was arrested for sex crimes against children, including luring minors and distributing obscene images. Also, Eric Sandsburn, a National Guard sergeant, pled not guilty to federal charges that he committed sex crimes against children for years. Charges that included interstate transport of underage girls for sexual purposes, producing pornographic videos of a minor, and possessing child pornography in 2014. Ohio. In 2017, Democratic former mayor of Hubbard, Ohio, Richard Keenan, was given a life sentence in jail for raping a 4-year-old girl after claiming she initiated it. Just check this out.
We don't want you guys looking on camera.
A guilty plea at Trumbull County Court today for the former mayor of Hubbard, Rich Keenan. Video of his family trying to shield him from our cameras. Well, today in court, Keenan admitted to raping a child, could face life behind bars now. 27 First News reporter Nadine Grimley was in the court today for the hearing and has that in our top story.
Former Hubbard Mayor Richard Keenan visibly shaken as he changed his plea to guilty on 20 counts of sex crimes, including rape, and agreed to a life sentence with the eligibility of parole after 10 years. According to court documents, the abuse began as early as September of 2013 when the victim, who was known to him, was just 4 years old.
It gives the victim some closure. It obviously keeps this young child from having to testify, and I think it's a good result given all the facts and circumstances.
Keenan's family was emotional, lashing out at us after the hearing and trying to block him from my camera view. Prosecutors say this just goes to show how difficult these cases are for everyone.
Yeah, people have feelings the whole time. We have feelings as a family. You don't care about his family.
I think what we've seen today is they're tough, right? They're tough on everyone. They're tough on the defendant's family, they're tough on the victim's family, and obviously our concern lies with the victim's family.
Keenan remains free on bond until his sentencing.
Keenan will undergo a pre-sentencing investigation, which could take a few weeks. And more in Nadine Grimley, WKBN 27 First News.
In 2004, Republican County Commissioner David Swartz pled guilty to molesting 2 girls under the age of 11 and was sentenced to 8 years in prison. One girl he started abusing at age 6 and abused her all the way until she was 17 years old. In 2018, an article on Vox News reported that Representative Jim Jordan was accused of ignoring sexual assaults of young men while he worked as a coach, dismissing this as locker room talk. In 1989, Republican Congressman Donald Buzz Lukens was found guilty of having sex with a female minor and sentenced to 1 month in jail, according to a St. Louis NPR article. He additionally refused to resign, and even after found guilty of having sex with a minor, he ran again for the same governmental position as a congressman in 1990. A New York Times article reported that Ohio State Representative Republican Wes Goodman was accused of fondling an underage boy in 2017. NBC4 Columbus reported on his story. Take a look.
So this morning, State Representative Wesley Goodman of Cardington in Morrow County has resigned amid allegations of inappropriate behavior. NBC4's Tyler Carter is at our Watch for Alert desk with the latest news. Tyler?
Yes, Mark. State Representative Wes Goodman's resignation comes as another shock out of the Ohio State House, as Goodman is the 3rd state lawmaker to resign in less than a month. Speaker of the Ohio House Clifford Rosenberger released a statement saying, quote, "I was alerted to details yesterday afternoon regarding his involvement in inappropriate behavior related to his Ohio office." He continues on to say that he met with Goodman later in the day where he acknowledged and confirmed his allegations. Goodman as well released a statement regretting his actions, saying, quote, "As I move on to the next chapter of my life, I sincerely ask for privacy for myself, my family, and my friends." No detail has been released on the nature of the alleged misconduct. We will continue to follow this story on air and online at NBC4i.com. Reporting at the Watch for Alert desk, I'm Tyler Carter for NBC4.
In 1990, Republican Columbus Mayor Dana Reinhardt was never indicted for molesting a 13-year-old babysitter. But years later, it was discovered that a cop that spied on her and her family had worked to protect the Republican Columbus mayor from an indictment. So you've got corruption in there too. The mayor raping a 13-year-old babysitter. Then you find out later on that a cop was spying on her and her family and was working with the mayor to protect himself from prosecution. Disgusting. Then you've got Hamilton Police Chief Tony Yoakum, who was also an unsuccessful Republican candidate for sheriff, who was arrested for the continuous sexual abuse of a child since she was 8 years old in 2020. Another guy running for sheriff who, on the side, is just casually raping a child. It seems like a typical thing. I mean, it's insane to me that these people actually run for these positions to enforce the laws, knowing that they've raped and are continuing to rape children. Make it make sense. Then you've got Mayor Virgil Hebert of Wilmette, Ohio, who pled guilty to gross sexual imposition and sexual battery for molesting a 15-year-old boy. He was fined $5,000 and sentenced to from 4 to 10 years in prison. Jeffrey Armstrong, the former mayor of Rockford, Ohio, and GOP Central Committee rep, was charged with distribution of child pornography and pled guilty. Additionally, he was alleged to be hoping to engage in sexual activity with a 5- and 6-year-old girl, and allegedly told an undercover officer that he had previously engaged in sexual activity with minors. Oklahoma. Republican Ralph Shorty, a former Oklahoma state senator and Trump's Oklahoma campaign chair, was indicted on 4 counts of human trafficking and child pornography. He pled guilty to a federal charge of child sex trafficking after hiring a 17-year-old boy for sex. Ralph was sentenced to 15 years in prison, in addition to 10 years of supervised release, and ordered to pay $125,000 in restitution. In 2019, former Republican congressional candidate Daniel Edmonds, Republican, molested a child many times over the course of 3 years. Additionally, in 2019, Oklahoma City councilman and former ICE agent Jeffrey Short molested multiple teenage girls while they spent the night at home visiting his daughter in 2019. Then you've got Holdenville City Councilor Richard West, who was convicted of possessing child pornography and of soliciting a minor, a child he met at age 12 in 2019. Ironically, Richard was a member of the organization called the Bikers Against Child Abuse. Oregon. According to a Reddit thread, Democratic Governor of Oregon Neil Goldschmidt, after being caught by a newspaper, publicly admitted to having a past sexual relationship with a 13-year-old girl after the statute of limitations on the rape charges had expired. So the Democratic governor claimed that the statute of limitations had expired, so he said, fuck it, yeah, I did have that sexual relationship with that 13-year-old girl, and nothing happened. Then you've got Democratic former mayor of Winston, Oregon, Kenneth Barrett, who in 2017 was arrested for setting up a meeting to have sex with a 14-year-old girl who turned out to be a police officer. Then you've got Republican activist Parker J. Bina, who pled guilty to the possession of child pornography on his home computer and was sentenced to 30 months in prison. John Michael Mann, Oregon's top administrative law judge for when there are disputes between citizens and state agencies, was indicted with 10 counts of encouraging child sexual abuse and possession of child pornography in 2022. Pennsylvania. Republican Judge Mark Pasahanik pleaded no contest to fondling a 10-year-old girl and was sentenced to 10 years of probation in 2004. Former Republican mayor of Seven Fields, Pennsylvania, Ed Bain, pled guilty to child pornography possession in 2013. During this investigation, the police seized 24 files, one of which was a 5-minute-long video involving a 9-year-old girl being molested on camera. Disgusting. Then you've got GOP Commissioner Jack Gardner of Millersville, Pennsylvania, who was convicted of molesting a 13-year-old girl and pled guilty. 30 years later, he's back and he's on the city commission. In 2019, Pennsylvania Republican State Senator Mike Fulmer resigned from his Senate seat after being charged with possession of child pornography. Take a look.
We're following a developing story. Former Pennsylvania Senator Mike Fulmer, who is facing charges for child pornography, just resigned. This coming just hours after the state attorney general's office arrested him for possession of child pornography and criminal use of a communication facility. Right now, the 63-year-old former lawmaker and his attorney are not returning phone calls. Investigators say they found 2 images of child pornography on Fulmer's cell phone. Authorities acted on a tip from social media site Tumblr, where they say Fulmer uploaded one of the photos. We'll continue to update the article on the CBS Pittsburgh's website as soon as we learn new details. Katie Johnston for KDKA News.
Then you've got Gregory J. Nyes, Republican mayoral candidate for Lititz, Pennsylvania, who was arrested in 2009 for repeatedly sexually assaulting one girl in his court documents. Police indicated they had tracked internet conversations in which Nyes logged on more than 500 times between February and April 2009, posing as a teenage girl. Rhode Island. In 2024, Kyle Delaney, a board member of the DCYF Advisory Board, was charged with 1 count of first-degree child molestation/sexual assault and 3 counts of second-degree child molestation. In 2017, Roy Bolden, a chair of the Providence GOP, was arraigned on charges of first-degree and second-degree child molestation and third-degree sexual assault. Then you've got Matthew Riley, a Rhode Island Republican councilman and local party chair who's been charged with molesting and soliciting a 12-year-old girl for sex. He was arrested when police found him passed out in his SUV with a crack pipe and cocaine. South Carolina. Republican racist pedophile and United States Senator Strom Thurmond had sex with a 15-year-old black girl who produced him a child. She was underage. That was rape. Then you've got Donald McKinney, a city council and mayor pro tem of Pickens, South Carolina, who was arrested for sexually abusing a minor between the ages of 15 and 16 in 2022. And now my good old home state, South Dakota. South Dakota's state GOP rep Ted Clout was arrested for rape, sexual exploitation of a minor, witness tampering, and stalking. Ted had raped 5 victims, including 3 foster children who lived with him. In 2022, South Dakota Republican State Senate candidate Joel Koskin was charged with grooming and sexually assaulting a family member who was a child from the ages of 14 to 19. Take a look.
Former legislative candidate Joel Koskin is headed to prison. The former South Dakota legislative candidate was walked out of the courtroom in handcuffs after the judge sentenced him to 10 years in prison on sex charges. According to earlier court documents, the victim in the case was a child. Today's hearing came after a judge rejected a plea agreement in the case. KELOLAND's Bob Mercer was in the courtroom for today's hearing. He's working on a detailed story for you that you'll be able to see on KELOLAND.com.
Then you've got Gil Koetzel, a Democratic member of the South Dakota Senate. I remember when this happened because I was living in Sioux Falls at the time. In 2013, the police executed a search warrant on Gil's home. They found marijuana, drug paraphernalia, and they uncovered loads of images of child pornography in his email accounts. Now, the day after that raid, though, Gil refused to face justice and he killed himself. I remember when this happened, it was huge news in my hometown and really disturbing. Tennessee. The Democratic Party chairman for Davidson County, Tennessee, Rodney Mullen, resigned amidst child pornography allegations in 2005. Then in 2021, Republican politician Keith Westmoreland was arrested on 7 felony counts of lewd and lascivious exhibition to girls under the age of 16. Which means exposing himself to children. After he was arrested, he committed suicide. Then in 2022, it was revealed that John Rose met his wife, Chelsea Doss, when she was only 17 and he was 41. Also in 2022, Army soldier Robert Adkins and his wife were sentenced to federal prison time for child pornography production crimes. Even the Army and the military isn't safe from pedophiles. And now we get to the state I live in now in Houston, Texas. Democratic Texas attorney and activist Mark Benavides was charged with having sex with a minor, inducing a child under 18 to have sex, and compelling prostitution of at least 9 legal clients, and possession of child pornography. He was found guilty on 6 counts of sex trafficking as well. Then there's Democratic Party leader for Victoria County, Texas, Stephen Jabour, who pled guilty to possession and receiving over 500,000 child pornography images. 500,000, over 500,000 child porn images. Democratic Party leader. Fucking hell. Then you got James Dub Maines, who was formerly GOP rep Joe Barton's deputy district director, who was sentenced for possession of child pornography. Then there's Gary Kaplinger, a mayor pro tem and city council member of Allen, Texas, who was arrested for 2 counts of child pornography possession in 2022. There's also Texas GOP congressional candidate Monica De La Cruz, who was accused of child abuse in 2021. Valley Mills, Texas mayor Rodney Burrell Nichols was charged with child indecency, and after he was indicted, he shot himself in the stomach and was then indicted for a further 10 charges, alleging that he raped a child under the age of 14 several times and had also raped another child. They had tried to charge him 14 years earlier in 2005, but the grand jury at the time declined to indict. Utah Representative House Majority Leader Kevin Garn was arrested for inappropriate sexual conduct with a minor in a hot tub. Then there's Carl Johnson, formerly a Republican mayor and a Latter-day Saints bishop, who was arrested for child molestation in 2022. He immediately confessed to police, claiming it was a compulsion, and admitted he had assaulted 6 children, 1 child that was just 2 years old. Vermont. In 2017, Vermont Republican State Senator Norman McAllister, who's one of the legislature's most outspoken conservatives, was charged with sexual assault, human trafficking, and prohibited acts. He made a plea deal, and a pretty sweet plea deal, and avoided a hefty prison sentence. Virginia. Democratic Virginia delegate Joe Morrissey was indicted on charges connected to his relationship with a 17-year-old girl and was charged with supervisory indecent liberties with a minor, electronic solicitation of a minor, possession of child pornography, and distribution of child pornography. Then in 2004, Republican strategist and Citadel Military College graduate Robin Vanderwall was convicted in Virginia on 5 counts of soliciting sex from boys and girls over the internet. Then you got Republican Nathan Larson of the Virginia House of Delegates, who's a self-confessed pedophile and white supremacist. Nathan was arrested on felony charges for kidnapping, child abduction, soliciting child pornography from a minor, and meeting a child for the intention of sex. There's also Republican fundraiser Richard A. Del Guido, who was found guilty of child porn charges and for paying 2 teenage girls to pose for sexual photos in 2003. According to a Washington Post article from 2002, the Republican of the Year, a man named Mark A. Grethen, was convicted on 6 counts of sex crimes involving children. Washington. According to a Reddit thread, Democratic Seattle Mayor Ed Murray resigned after multiple accusations of child sexual abuse were levied against him, including by his own family members, in 2017. In 2003, party leader Paul Ingram pleaded guilty to 6 counts of raping his own daughters and served 14 years in federal prison. Then you've got Republican delegate Robert McKee, who resigned in 2008 after police seized 2 computers and videotapes from his home pertaining to a child pornography investigation. There's also Republican Michael T. McCourt, who molested children for 30 years behind a civic front as a utilities commissioner, political operative, and community volunteer. Afterwards, after being found that he molested children for 30 years, he had the balls to ask the judge for leniency because of all of his previous community activism. West Virginia. In 2023, a member of the National Guard, William Craddock, was arrested for charges on first-degree sexual assault and first-degree sexual abuse. Authorities say Craddock is accused of sexually assaulting a juvenile on at least 300 occasions, while the child was between the ages of 7 and 12 years old. Then you got Andrew Menendez, who in 2024 was accused of sexually abusing a 15-year-old and found guilty on charges of third-degree sexual assault. He was a former deputy. Wisconsin. According to a Reddit thread, Democratic Mayor of Racine, Wisconsin, Gary Becker, was convicted of attempted child seduction, child pornography, and other child sex crimes. And Wyoming. Town Councilman David Bernard in Graybull, Wyoming, was charged with possessing and distributing child pornography in 2022. So at the end of the day, you can probably tell that my camera died because this was a really long episode, but yeah, this is about it. There's also, just countrywide and the miscellaneous people in power that have abused children. Democracy Now! Reported in 2015 that Colombian government and FARC rebels concluded that United States soldiers and military contractors sexually abused at least 54 children in Colombia between 2003 and 2007. The investigators cited one case where 53 girls in the town of Melgar were targeted by contractors from America who filmed themselves raping these children and sold the films as child pornography. In another case, a 12-year-old girl was allegedly drugged and raped by a U.S. Army sergeant and a contractor. Under immunity agreements, none of the alleged abusers were ever published or were ever punished or publicly identified. The media group FAIR notes that the story received no coverage in the U.S. corporate media. I wonder why. A number of U.S. outlets also reported on a new Justice Department probe, which concludes U.S. drug enforcement agents in Colombia participated in sex parties with prostitutes hired by Colombian drug cartels. According to a thread on Reddit, there are various other United States persons in places of power that have engaged in child sex crimes. This just goes on to talk about, obviously, you've got Democratic donor, activist, and Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein, Asia Argento, who is an actress who settled a lawsuit for sexual harassment stemming from sexual activities with an underage actor, Bill de Blasio, the Democratic activist and an aide of New York Mayor Bill de Blasio, Jacob Schwartz, who was arrested for possessing over 3,000 child pornographic images. I mean, there's so much. This list could go on and on and on. But at the end of the day, guys, this is not a one-party problem. This is not just one group of people that is doing this, and I hope that this episode has really opened your mind to this. This is all parties, Republican, Democrat, Independent. This is a systemic problem. This is a cultural problem, and these people are out there and they are in our government today. So we need to stay as aware as physically possible. We need to fight, we need to protest, we need to speak up about this shit, and we need to be vigilant, because if we aren't, these pedophiles are just going to have free reign to victimize as many children in America as they would like to. But since my camera's gone, I love you all. Thank you for listening today. I know this was a long and kind of coarse episode, but it was something that we needed to get out. Thank you for tuning in this evening. I'm Colin Browen. We will see you guys next week. Keep those tinfoil hats on. And after this episode, really consider what this all means. What does this mean to you, and what does this mean for our country? What does this mean for America in the past, and what does this mean for you and our country going into the future? Have a great rest of your week, and stay suspicious. I'll see y'all in the next one. Really consider what this all means. What does this mean to you, and what does this mean for our country? What does this mean for America in the past, and what does this mean for you and our country going into the future? Have a great rest of your week, and stay suspicious. I'll see y'all in the next one. For our country, what does this mean for America in the past, and what does this mean for you and our country going into the future? Have a great rest of your week, and Stay suspicious. I'll see y'all in the next one.